Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to Tech Talk with Jay. Thank you for tuning in wherever in the world you are watching from. My name is Zara Carbonell, and I will be moderating today's discussion. So here at Tech Talks with Jay, finance isn't the only thing that is going borderless because we are too. The series is here to serve you with tech know-how from tech leaders and techpreneurs from all over the world. And to cruise with you on this adventure, let me introduce the man of the hour, entrepreneur, speaker, and chief finance officer of the Machnet. Ladies and gents, help me welcome Mr. Jay Dahal.
Hey Dara, how are you?
I'm good. Everything has been amazing. How are you, Jay?
I'm doing wonderful. Last time when we did the pod, I was a bit jet lagged, but now today I feel wonderful. I've been in Nepal for at least a week or two, so I'm completely tuned into this time zone, tuned into the weather, with families and the stuff. So it's amazing. Good to be here.
Awesome. Jay, today, well, every pod is quite exciting because we really mix up our topics. But today, I think is something that every business owner should want to tune in to because our topic today is entitled the Numbers That Matter. So, we will be talking about the financial situation across Southeast Asia and what that means for the rest of the world. I guess before we introduce it further, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so when you said numbers, as you can imagine, this is what I do all day long. Been in the accounting finance profession for a decade or so. It's near and dear to me. And then when you think about the thing that we're talking about in Southeast Asia and what this means to the world, uh, Asia is really near and dear to me because I was born and raised here. Nepal is in Asia. I migrated to the U.S. in my early age, in my ripe age of 17, and then now we're talking about in Asia and then U.S. and then it's both how these both in a continent intersect each other. So I think it's really really interesting for me. And then we have a amazing guest who has a domain expertise in Asia, where I didn't spend half of my life there, even though I was born there. And we'll be talking a lot about startup ecosystem. We'll be talking about opportunities in Southeast Asia, probably kind of work around regulations and things like that, and then how this and in both continent in a cross path in finance and an ecosystem for entrepreneurs. And it'll be an interesting journey for us to really understand and how a lot of things are shifting in the past in a few years. So I'm really looking forward to learn more.
Right. And especially, as someone who is doing business in Southeast Asia, we know that in the last 2 to 3 years, especially, business have gone through a roller coaster of sorts. And I'm sure that you felt that in the US as well. People in Europe have been feeling that also. There's crashing and booming, everything all at once. And it feels like we're trying to catch up with so many things. Many entrepreneurs have been extra careful when it comes to trekking through their financials, and we are hoping that today's discussion might just help us shed a little more light on that. Like I said earlier, today is quite interesting, but I think one of the things that we are looking forward to knowing more about is dissecting the differences and the similarities of the financial ecosystem in Southeast Asia, in Europe, in the Americas, especially that we will be having viewers from all over the world. This insight might help them prove or make better action steps moving forward. Yeah, I'm very excited to see the trends, which brings us to our special guest for today. So let's not wait any longer. Ladies and gents, our special guest is the director of Index Asia. He is an independent corporate finance advisory. It is a corporate finance advisory boutique in mid-cap transactions in Southeast Asia, benefiting from a background in strategic advisory in Europe with a spell for a North American IT service company, asset management, and entrepreneurship in the Philippines. He has developed a sheer understanding of business optimization, playing a key part in supporting its financial advisory market and mindset. Everyone, please help me welcome the director, the partner, and the co-founder of Index Asia, Mr. Kieran Martin.
Hello.
Hi, Kieran. How
Hey,
are you?
Doing great. Doing great. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Thank you
hi
so much
Karen.
here. We are very
No.
excited as we've been geeking about it in the last few minutes. I guess to start with, Kieran, why don't you give our viewers a better idea of what Index Asia is all about? I know I said a bit more about it when I introduced you, but maybe it would be better also if it comes from you.
Yeah, for sure. So Index Asia is a financial advisory boutique. So we help companies with their equity transactions mostly. So
Mhm,
that's fundraising, mergers, acquisitions, and
mhm.
divestments when you want to sell your business. We focus on transactions from 10 to 150 million dollars,
Yeah.
and we are present in the Philippines, Vietnam, and we are opening a new country, but we don't know where yet. So that's we are trying to bridge Europe with Asia, so it might
Right.
be in Europe for the next stop.
Right. I mean, given that, these things are quite delicate to work around, how far is your team in adapting tech in your operations, if any?
So I think tech is already widely used. I mean, we all need the typical Microsoft or Google solutions to even communicate with your clients. But moving forward, I think there's a lot of optimization that is possible. The appearance of AI, I think, is a given, especially in our
Mhm.
industry for all agencies, not only financial
Mhm.
advisory boutique, but in all industries. I think that will be a key game changer, and all supportive solutions that includes payment, that includes video calls that are widely used every day. Uh,
Right, right. So at least then we can say that, okay, Southeast Asia is quite prime when it comes for adopting tech solutions already. My next question is for the both of you. Um, I'm just gonna jump to it. Okay, we're very excited to see the differences in different continents when it comes to financial ecosystems. And given that Jay, you are quite familiar with Asia and the US, Kieran, you're quite familiar with the EU and ASEAN, Southeast Asian nations. What would you say are the most promising and the most challenging industries when it comes to, well, finances for one, but tech, I guess, for Jay for another?
Yeah,
Jay, you
yeah.
can go ahead with this.
Yeah, maybe Karen can probably talk more about ASEAN, and then if you and then put it in perspective, there's a lot of things that happen in Nepal because that's where I kind of predominantly work out of the United States and in some other countries in Southeast Asia. So in the U.S., I think the most promising thing that we keep hearing and seeing, and I think that everybody's pretty aware is the promising thing is tech. And then tech you can kind of dissect that into finance and AI, ML, biotech and things like that in nature. So with a strong presence of Silicon Valley and the emerging tech hub, the sectors offer a variety of opportunity for innovations and investments. So I think that's
Mhm.
definitely a promising sector. And then second thing that I keep hearing and seeing, and with the post pandemic that we're seeing is the huge investments in biotech and pharmaceutical. So the U.S. remains and it still is the leader of research and development, creating opportunity. And so, for example, like drug discovery or medical advancements and things like that. So those are a promising industry that I can see. And then I think the third one, if I have to pick, it's probably renewable energy. I think we keep hearing about ESG, we keep hearing about
Mhm.
investment in solar, wind, probably hydrogens and the nuclear physics and things like that. I think growing focus of in the U.S. government and then sustainable energy, clean energy productions. I think that creates massive amount of opportunities in the U.S. and also in the global sector. I think if I have to put like three buckets of in a promising industry that's coming in the U.S., would probably tech, energy, and probably in the biotech sector. And obviously, there are a lot of sectors that are pretty challenging in the US that I can see. I think the one thing that everybody's on top of their head is probably a labor, like manufacturing, where everything is shipped out to somewhere else, like in China, India, Vietnam, Cambodia, and all over the world, right? I think, and one of the key reasons is probably the high labor cost in the US. And increasing automation definitely help, but also create some challenging challenges for businesses to focus on manual labor. So I think that's something it's challenging in the US, in my opinion. And then the second thing that I keep seeing in the US is probably the traditional retail space, like SMEs, either in the hospitality
Mhm.
space, either in retail banking space, anything that has a storefront. Uh, because of post pandemic, a lot of people and then businesses kind of adopted digital adoptions whereby they gotta increase competitions either in the e-commerce side or lending side, in which directly correspond to the declining revenue of those businesses. So, for example, there's a lot of storefront has to close down because people adapted to do online ordering either through Amazon or DoorDash or
Right.
Shopify and things like that. So, if I have to put two things that it's challenging in the US is probably retail block and then manufacturing. I would love to
Retail.
hear what Kira has to say.
Yeah, actually, Kieran, that would be
Yeah.
interesting only because you are on the other end of it. Have you seen this firsthand? Do you align with Jay's experience?
No, I fully agree. Actually, the energy, I think, challenge has been initiated lately by the U.S. administration. They are really trying to find solutions. So it's an opportunity, but it's kind of also a challenge to be able to outperform their consumption in energy. They're really dependent right now on the not as many as not as much as the European countries, but energy is definitely an industry that will be profoundly changed in the coming decades. So that's one. More for Asian industries where I might have more knowledge on. I think the defensive industries are definitely the one that we can focus on. So that includes infrastructure, of course, but also real estate. There's a massive backlog of housing for like affordable housing for a lot of
Right.
population in the Philippines. Those are constraints that are less true in the US. And overall, yeah, tech solutions are going to be different. The US is a pioneer along with China in evolution there. So I would be surprised that a lot of things come out of it that would be useful all
Yeah.
over the world.
Are these existing, challenges and booming industries that you guys have worked with recently, Kieran? Because I'm just curious, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, we are moving towards a more tech savvy society, but what about businesses that are very brick and mortar? And there
Yeah.
are a lot still in Asia. I believe both of you can relate to this one.
Yeah, but just to answer on that one, maybe where we are more active is actually the step right before what we call digital infra. So, for
Right.
instance, where we were really active last year is in the financing of construction of towers to be able for the Philippines to have internet connectivity. Because of course you cannot have an economy based on internet without internet connection anyway. So
Right.
that's where we were most active on, and like I mentioned, real estate challenges because that's just the ecosystem that you build around those solutions. So that's kind of the first step. Data centers is another angle of a key priority for us, and then once the ecosystem is built, that's where technology companies can thrive. That's what has been missing, I think, in the Philippines before.
Right. So basically, you're prepping everything
Yeah,
so that when
yeah,
the tech comes in, everyone's ready for it. Okay.
exactly. Yeah.
Jay, were you going to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think there's one part that I have to respectively disagree with Kieran. It's about housing in the U.S. Is it has become very unaffordable. And where I live in San Francisco, there is a massive shortages of affordable housing. To be honest, there might be
Okay.
difference in some other states, but there is still a massive amount of work the government has to do for affordable housing because it has become tremendously expensive for people with the middle income can afford to even live. Like if you think about renting a house in or apartment in San Francisco has become probably close to per parent of two kids, they have to pay around $3,000-4,000, and which is massive. I think if you think about with the minimum wages out there, which is I think like $16-17 per hour. So no, yeah, I think to have a huge internet penetration, there has to be massive infrastructure development, like what Kieran is doing and building towers. And a lot of places like in Nepal, we're building bridges, to go across the country, right? To build roads and infrastructures and the trains and things like that. So I think digital innovations is definitely something that it's everybody's mind, but there is still a massive amount of infrastructure development that needs to be done. Either it's on the housing side, either it's in building roads and bridges and things like that. In my opinion.
Hmm. I mean, and seeing that there are challenges and there are opportunities, where then do you guys think tech comes in? Like, how, I guess for Kieran, it's how does tech contribute to economic growth? And for Jay, it's um, are there regulations that you think might help speed things up?
Yeah, I think that tech plays a very crucial role in economic growth in both in the Western world and obviously in Asian or Southeast Asian country. But I think there is key differences because the US has a huge advantage because they already have a massive amount of infrastructure built already, right? That has become a driving force for the economic growth for decades. And then now if you compare that apples to apples in Asian market, there is a huge amount of infrastructure yet to be built, like what Kieran's talked about, building a tower is important to actually build in ISPs, internet service providers around the country. And that's important where US has become forefront on those kind of stuff. So there's a lot of things that can be mimicked in Southeast Asian countries so that those can become an enabler for the economic growth, right? That's one part. Additionally, integrating the technology into traditional industries has also can also improve efficiencies and productivity. I think in manufacturing, for example, building a tech around it, it's going to
Mhm.
help productivity of the people versus using a massive amount of human labor. And then the mature industry, which is tech, and the strong network of investors, research institutions, and the tech hub like in Silicon Valley, that can be mimicked in the Southeast Asian countries to kind of utilize those resources or those knowledge that can help in Asian markets. So I can give you an example what we do in the US, can we do that the similar thing in Nepal, right? So those are the things that we're thinking about: mobile penetration, saying internet banking, making payments through to pay the utility bills through to mobile phones, so people don't have to stay online for hours, right? Booking cars on their cell phone so that they don't have to go like what we do in Uber in the US. So those are just a little example. And then some of the things that are, I think, the Asian market has even forefront is, for example, when I look at a QR payment is huge in Nepal. We are still behind in the US. If you kind of compare that, there are some tech-enabled businesses at forefront in the Asian market that is not even doesn't even exist because in the US, when I go around, I still carry my debit or credit card. I don't carry that in the US in Nepal. The QR payment is huge, right? So this is a lot of the, I would say, the things that needs to be adopted. But adopting things in the US that can help economic growth in Asian market has a huge implications. The other thing that I can also think is in Nepal in general, the FDI, the foreign direct investments, has a huge, I would say that the limits. For example, to send money from one country to US, there is kind of like there is no restrictions. But in Nepal, you have to have $160,000, just a ballpark as we record this
Wow.
pod. You have to have 160K of FDI to do invest in Nepal. So those are the bottlenecks for any company. So for example, if I have to invest in a startup, and there are some limitations that I can do because people like me, can I invest 160K in every startup that I really really like? Those are things that needs to be changed because the regulation needs to be changed and the people needs to change so that we can drive economic growth in terms of developing the nation. So I'd love to hear what Kieran has to say.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, interesting. Well, I again I fully agree there. Yeah, for me, like most of the tech play is about innovation and efficiency. So
Yep.
when you're referring to economic growth, it's related to it's great to solve issues that couldn't be solved without it.
Right.
So tech payment is,
True.
you mentioned the payment solutions. That's a given. I think
Mm.
the Philippines has been really able to embrace the latest solutions that have been developed. That it's not even as popular in Europe, I would say. In Europe, you have like a prior layer of technology that emerged, which was like a credit card. So credit card penetration is very high, whereas here it isn't. So technology has this ability to make companies find its growing way. So I think that's how I would like to summarize it.
Right.
Overall, yeah.
And for your, I mean, current or past clients, has the immersion of technology affected their like business landscape at all?
Definitely. I mean, we also work with tech-only type of companies. So, of course, their
Right.
entire business model is based on innovation,
Yeah.
based on tech. We can see the benefit of it. The interesting parts are when traditional companies are
Mm.
also including tech in their mindset. Usually, the approach is a bit different because it's, of course, it's slower, it's more,
Mm.
it's central to their strategy. But more and more, those companies are able to embrace it. So
Right.
yeah,
Does it
it's
make your job any easier or same?
no.
Probably.
Obviously, it's better for those companies because they're it's a competitive advantage. So the ones that don't, I mean, you can really benefit from it.
Right.
It's great for
Okay.
it's better for them.
It's great for everyone. So now that we're on the topic of tech, Jay, what let's talk regulation. Basically, how is the lack of regulation affecting our financial situation? Will we, will we see a trend upwards when it comes to finances or the economy for both the US and Nepal, I guess for Southeast Asia also, if we have better regulation? Question mark.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think this is such an important topic because I was reading
Mhm.
about Coinbase the other day, and then how Brian Armstrong, who is the
Right.
CEO and founder of Coinbase, has to actually go to Dubai to do a lot of cryptocurrency stuff, right? That he's trying to do in the US, even though they were the pioneer of on a crypto exchange, and then the lack of these regulations can actually hinder the innovations in the country in general. So I'm actually pretty sad to see this. The US hasn't been really doing in such nature because this is such an important topic. And then this can significantly impact the opportunities and the challenges that business face in various industries. Cryptocurrency is one, and the fintech is another one. Now we
Mm,
keep hearing about AI and ML, like with an open AI and going,
mm,
building this chat GPT
right.
3, 4, 5, who knows how many, right? And how does that going to get regulated? And can we regulate it? Because I think in a well-established regulation, business can have a benefit if there is a clear framework that can be governed, that can govern their operations, that provide that is protected to consumer,
Mm,
investors, promote the fair competition with other companies, right? However, the overly restrictive and outdated regulation, which US, you can think about it, can stifle the innovations and hinder growth, right? So that
right.
people don't have to go outside of the country. Like now, unfortunately, a lot of crypto companies has to go outside of the US because there is no clear path, there is no clear legal framework, because they can invest significant amount of money, but tomorrow if there is no legal framework, then what's the point, right? They can exit the company, they can give a fair dividend or exit to the stakeholders. So, and there has been ongoing debate in the United States to update the regulations and things like that. But I can clearly see there will be something coming up on the AI side because of the open AI and then chat
Yeah.
GPT, things like that, right? In the
Yeah.
other side, and in the region like less developed, like let's say Nepal in general, there are a lot of uncertainty and there is a risk due to the lack of clear guidance. I think that can also create an opportunity for entrepreneurs to just go in and do something and wait. So, for example, if we can think about Airbnb, who doesn't own a hotel, but they have this massive marketplace. Uber, who
Right.
doesn't own a car, they have a massive marketplace. If they wait for regulations and to do this, probably we wouldn't see Uber or Airbnbs of the world today, right? So I think the overall impact of business and opportunity depends on the balance between how does this foster innovations and ensure consumer protection, how the market become more stable, or there's a fair competition. They
Mm-mm.
stay between the regulations so that the good thing happens, the innovations happen. I think there's a lot to be done in the US. To be honest, I'm not to be truly happy about that, but there has to
Mm.
be some legal framework for these kind of innovative companies.
Right. And it's a massive comeback from, I mean, the COVID situation obviously affected the whole world, but especially businesses because we were put on halt for a good 6 months at best. I don't know how that situation was in Nepal or in the US, but at least here in the Philippines, it was a total lockdown. Like especially for brick and mortar businesses, they weren't even allowed to operate or they had to do it from their backyards. And I guess my question for you, Kieran, here is since since the happening of COVID, what trends have you been seeing from businesses? And do you think there's anything that we can learn from them?
Yeah, for sure. So I think COVID has forced tech adoption. So a lot of traditional companies had to close
Right.
down, and it supported the companies that were tech friendly. That had like a consequence in really boosting the valuation of those tech firms. But since we're kind of past COVID now, this surge has really gone down.
Yeah.
So we're going to enter into a consolidation phase. I think that's one major trend post COVID.
Okay.
And the second thing of COVID, I would say that more generally, is it has disrupted supply chains overall. Like we live in a globalized world, and during COVID was kind of stopped. There are many consequences to that, but one that I think we're feeling already, and we're going to feel strongly in the coming weeks, is
Mhm.
inflations. And to combat inflations, central banks had to increase their interest rates, which will eventually affect all like
Okay.
retail banks on their ability to disburse loans at cheap rates. So all the loans are going to increase, and that will also has some consequence for companies that won't be able to raise. So there is a competitive advantage for the ones that have liquidity and the ones that won't. So we overall will, I think, enter into a consolidation phase, and maybe one consequence to this, it's let's not forget that we were really living in an optimized global world, a globalization world, and
Mm.
maybe moving forward, it's going to be changed a little bit.
Mm.
I think.
Yeah. Anything you want to add to that, Jay?
Yeah, no, I think I couldn't agree more on what Kieran is saying. I think we live in a very globalized world. What happens in the US, what happens in the EU definitely affect every single countries in the world. As you can imagine, and during pandemic 2020 through 2022 or even early 2023, the federal government in the US pumped so much money. When you give so much cocaine to a person in a short period of time, you gotta take it out, right? And then when that happens in a short period of time, things is going to blast. That's what's happening right now in the economy. If you can think about all the money that got in, it has to come out in a very short period of time. And when that
Right.
happens, sorry to use that word, but it's true. It's real, and the impact
Mm.
is, and you can see the aftermath of that now banking crisis in the U.S. when Fed raised the rate of 5-6% on FDs in a Fed fund rate, and then now
Yeah.
that the banks can't sustain the business, they are running on a huge, massive, unrealized loss that led to Silicon Valley Bank, Sterling Bank. Yeah, I think Sterling Bank, right? Or in a couple other banks to go down on the path. So I think it's actually it's detrimental to the economy. So I think
Right.
raising rates continuously is not a I think it's not a solution in my opinion. There has to
Right.
be a balance in between so that the Fed has to act properly. But I think in the hindsight, if you think about the financial trend that we see post COVID, it's pretty impactful, right? Like I said, people start accelerating adoptions of digital technologies on various industries, not just on finance. And I feel like on every single aspect that
Mm-hmm.
has accelerated, in my opinion.
Mm.
It has demonstrated the high viability of remote work, which I'm not a too big a fan of now, but because it has actually brought down the productivity. So I think people need to go back to work to work, and then kind of go back to that productivity level that it used to be, right? If you think about it. But an overall, the use of technology has really accelerated with the pandemic. But at the same time, I think we need to hold the horses to make sure that economy does not go bust. I think that the central government has to do some heavy work.
Right. Oof. That's a lot of load for them to carry. But they should
Yeah.
start acting soon, though. Um, okay, let's take a moment to absorb all of that.
Yeah.
But no, because it's so true. Like I can't even imagine, while you were explaining that, I remember Jay, you did have a post about smaller banks having the biggest problems because like what
Yeah.
Kieran said, it's a matter of liquidity. And if in the US these small banks have these humongous problems, I can't imagine, how Kieran in our provincial banks, they're like a bank that only has one branch ever.
Mm-mm.
How do you keep up with that? I
Yeah.
mean, especially with the loans that you've already given out, right? And then I'm sure a lot of people aren't able to even pay these off because these are people in the lower income brackets. Um,
But see, I
Shoot.
think the issue, I think, I mean, I don't see that issue in Nepal, and I'll tell you why. And there are foreign reasons for that. The banks are too powerful in Asian countries, I think, especially in Nepal. Because if you think about it, imagine this: you are in the U.S. and then you are putting money in the FD, fixed deposit,
Yeah.
and you're getting, you're getting 1% or less than 1%, like J.P. Morgan says, Citi, Wells Fargo, Bank of America. You don't get much interest on a personal savings account. However, you take that money, bring it back to Nepal, you can get up to 13% interest rate. Like it's crazy as it
13%.
sounds like, and it's up to 13% on FTs. And then banks are too powerful here, and people will be disincentivized to invest in something else, because if they put $100,000 and just clearly they can make more money just putting their money into FTs. So banks are more secure in Nepal. So there is a distinction between how economy works in Western world, and I would love to hear and how does Philippines and Indonesia, Vietnam works in from
Right.
parents' perspective.
Yeah,
But
Kira.
in Nepal, it's different. Banks are too powerful. There's like a syndicate that runs in Nepal where it's too powerful for people to invest that money somewhere else, because you don't get 13% return in anything else in the U.S., right? If a venture capitalist can return 2x, it's golden. So yeah, it's kind of crazy. It sounds like I think banks are too powerful here to break in this country.
Right. Is it the same here, Kieran? I'm actually not even sure the interest rate that we have in savings accounts or other accounts here in the Philippines. Would you have more knowledge in this?
But yeah, in terms of deposits, I think digital banks are offering as high as 6%, but that's already really high. So 13 is honestly uh,
Magic.
impressive. Yeah. You made a good point, Zara, earlier on rural banks. Actually, the BSP is trying to force rural banks to get stronger, so merge
Mhm.
or acquire, get bigger overall, to have like a bigger liquidity base, because there's always this rule where you need at least 10% in cash and
Right.
disburse 90% in loans. So you avoid the risk of bank rush that can
Yeah.
really close down the bank. So right now, I think the administration in the Philippines is really trying to make this safer. Um,
Right.
Having said that, I think one detail I'd like to mention regarding more the U.S. situation is I think they're starting to have some fears on the public debt, and where
Yeah.
the states might actually default, and that's the reason why a lot of investors are indeed looking for higher yield and higher return type of investment opportunities. So there's a strong switch of investor mindset that affect the entire system there. That might not be as true in for example, in Asia. So that's where I would definitely agree.
Yeah, that's so
I um
interesting.
I don't know if I don't know if I 100% agree on Fed is going to be default. I think that's probably going to be catastrophic
It-
for everybody in the world, to be
yeah,
honest.
it's
But
it's
but but definitely people are looking for safer haven. I think where the money can be parked so that it will have
Mhm.
a good return for their investors, right?
Mhm.
Oh, Nepal is a good place. You can get 13% up to 13% interest rate here. If you can get the money down here, or take a repatriate
Everyone
if and
watching
when you
this,
need it.
if you didn't know where to put your money, put it in Nepal. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I mean, the last few minutes has been super interesting already. I'm learning too many things all in one go. And I think one of the more intriguing things, at least to me personally, is, the both of you have worked both in the Eastern and Western world, and you know how conservative Asia can be in general. Society, business, especially. My question is, how did you take up that challenge to localize? Because we've seen a lot of Western businesses try to, I mean, shove their idea down the throat of Asia, and Asia's just like, no, my whatever granny said, this isn't how it is. Cultural appropriation is a big thing. How did you localize? Number one, or how important is localization? The second one would be, how did your business specifically adapt to that culture appropriation?
Yeah, I can
Um,
start. Yeah.
okay.
So no, but overall, I think it's all down to sufficiency and stability of a country. So when you rely on foreign countries,
Mm,
you can be at risk. I think the continent right now that is more in the limelight in that situation is more like North Africa,
yeah.
where since the Ukraine war, Ukraine Russia war, has posed some threats on especially their ability to import
Mhm.
enough wheat and other
Right.
food elements. And when you are not able to feed your population, you have insurrections and instability overall. So one key, I think, example that we've seen since the beginning of that war are countries that are really emphasizing, and that includes the Philippines, their strategy towards financing local companies in their food production, so agriculture related solutions. So India has been one of the pioneer, and the Philippines lately also, in especially in the self-sufficiency for rice, and their rate is at like 80%, and they're planning to be self sustainable by 2027. This was a big announcement, and that's a good testimony of what can be localized and kind
Yeah.
of should be.
Yeah. How about
Yeah.
on your end, Jay?
Yeah, I think I don't know if you remember, Dara. We talked about the importance of localizations in our last pod with Mark.
Yeah.
Um,
Like, yeah.
oh, wait, with Mike. Yes, sorry. Uh, and then I think the mimicking what has happened in the West, it might not work in the East, right? If you talk about
Right.
either localizing or culture is different. How do you cross collaborate and cross pollinate the ideas and tech,
Yeah.
and then even the services, and how can we use that to adopt in the very nations here? It might not work, and I'll give you an example. You know,
Mm,
in the U.S. there's like a massive amount of flat land where they do agriculture and things like that. In the Nepal
mm,
it's a hilly region, a lot of terrace farming that works. You can't bring those used equipments and try to do farming
right.
here. It's not
Right.
gonna work.
Right.
You can learn from it, but you gotta
Mm,
adapt to the culture. You gotta adapt to the landscape and topography of these very nations, and then you
mm,
can tweak and twist so that it's gonna work here. So
right.
definitely, I think working with the local partners, how things has done, and kind of innovate around it, not just go into it, go around it and help with the tech sectors or even the hardware sector. Agriculture was huge, tourism
Mm,
is huge in Nepal, right? Even in Southeast Asia in general, it's a beautiful country. It just hasn't been
mm,
fully optimized the beauty of this very nation for economic growth, right? So I
right.
think cross collaborating with the local partners, building tech around it, that is going to work here, and work with the culture of this country. You don't try to bring West here.
Right.
Come and learn about the culture and kind of integrate with it, right? And I call it, I use the term reintegrating,
Mm,
reintegrating the culture of the very nations, either it's Indonesia or Vietnam or Nepal or Philippines and whatnot, and it is
right.
going to work because now you're actually going into the cultural space and kind of adopting and kind of bringing the learnings from the West for economic development here. So I think
Right.
that's how the business needs to localize and kind of adopt and help the economic growth of the
Mm,
country.
right.
I'd like to add. I'd like to add. Yeah, tech related. I didn't mention that, but I think we've also seen like countries like China, Russia that are really promoting their local tech solutions. So I tend to think that it could be a trend also, like globally. U.S. has been, I mean, definitely dominant in that sector so far.
Right.
It could, it could change also in the future.
Right.
Shameless plug about Machnet. This is what we do. We actually enable small businesses globally to move money, so they don't have to rely on the incumbents who are basically taking a gigantic piece of the
Mm,
pie. So we want to enable small businesses because they are the backbone of small businesses. Their local
right.
product is going to work because this is
Mm,
already popular within their people, like within the diaspora if they are living overseas or within the local economy. So just wanted to add this.
Right. Yeah, no, I was just gonna throw in there also one of the bigger innovations that exist in the Western world is marketing tech, where advertising solutions go straight through an app, they go straight through a website. Um, and we've been trying to adapt that here in the Philippines, and it's been a struggle only because Southeast Asia is known for face-to-face relations. We like doing business over coffee in front of the person we're actually talking to. I'm sure, Kieran, you've had a bunch of clients who really wanted to spend time with you, and at the beginning they really ask about, okay, so where are you from, what are you doing, how do you like the country. There's always that first 30 minutes of just catching up, which I think is very Asian, versus when you do business in Europe, because that I've done like a few years back. It's hi, how are you? Pleasantries for 2 minutes, just so we're polite. But after that is okay, let's get down to business. I think that's one thing that we all had to adapt to in doing business here in Asia versus doing it in Europe and in the US. It's something more practical, but I think everyone who's watching this, who's done business in Asia, has been like, oh, yeah, it even goes, oh, regards to your uncle or your kids or whatever it is. I heard it was your birthday, something. So it's very true. So I do hope that, whoever's watching this, starting a business, do consider the culture that you're working with so that you start off on the right foot. Okay, anywho, so Jay, you've already mentioned what Machnet does, and I guess this is such a fun question to me because I know what both of your companies do, right? And going borderless also means reimagining whatever future we can create. So I do want to challenge the both of you to kind of tinker with your imaginations and see, okay, how would you envision a company like Magnet working with a company like Index Asia? How would that look like? So I'm gonna let Jay take over first, only because he's practiced this so many times with a lot of other companies. I always challenge him. Okay, today you're gonna imagine this. So yeah, and then Kieran, you
Yeah.
can chime in after.
Yeah, no, I think being a boutique advisor from, I think what I can think about Index Asia and what Kieran is doing is, is working with a lot of tech-enabled companies that are in the space who needs when who has a requirement to move money. So where we come in as Magnet is we're really, really good on taking money out of the US and dispersing into the multiple different countries around the world. Either it's in the Europe or Asia or Latin and all over the world. I think, and then reason I think it's important to really deep dive into why this is important, why we're doing it, because the traditional ecosystem where money movement is being done by large scale institutions, like predominantly banks in general, when it comes to sending money abroad, right? And if you think about sending money through bank, it comes with a hefty cost. But now, when we started building Machnet, what we realized is the backbone of every country, every nations, either it's in Vietnam or Nepal or India or Philippines or Indonesia, these small businesses are going global post-pandemic. Everybody wants to sell something abroad. Everybody wants to receive money for the things that they do. Either it's a services, either a freelancers working in the Philippines wanted to get money, either a shopkeeper selling gift card to their parents or selling groceries to their parents. The people living in the US wanted to support their families. People in the business wanted to pay the vendors. People wants to pay freelancers around the world. This is where we kind of intersect, because it's always complicated when it comes to sending money. It's very complicated when it's in terms of investing from US to Asia, and then probably Kieran can relate this. And where we comes in and intersect is you don't need to worry about anything when it comes to moving money from US, from a person or business, and dispersing or terminating that transaction to an individual or business in the other side of the world. We take care of the regulatory side to make sure that money originates compliantly. We process that transaction compliantly. We also deposit that money onto the other side of the world, wherever that is and whoever that is, as long as obviously that is legal, right? So we don't do illegal stuff here. So one typical use case could be, Karen is doing an M&A transactions, and there is an investor out of the US who wants to invest money and buy a fintech out of Vietnam, for example. Now, either they could be wiring money directly to their companies, and And if the money is, let's just say $10 million, and I know you mentioned, Kieran, it's you do from 10 to 150. Now it comes to $150 million. There's a lot of things that you have to do. It takes a while for that money to get there. And this is where we come in and play a very significant role to move money compliantly in the matter of days, right? So it is probably even matter of few hours to move money, whatever the size is, pretty quickly for our clients. So this is where it comes into place, and then help companies to either build applications, either move money seamlessly, as easy as possible. So I think there is a synergy there in longer term, I think. I hope that
Gotcha.
makes sense.
Yeah, interesting. Is that actually a reality right now, Kieran? Are
Yeah, for
there
sure.
investors across the world investing into Asian companies that are in your portfolio? Is that a thing?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, now maybe only 20% of our transactions are local investor with a local company. So most of our transactions are foreign based, and even ourselves, we now have operations in different countries, and we're incorporated in Hong Kong, and so even our own situation is already in need of this type of services,
Yeah.
and our clients even more. So that's definitely one. Fully agree there. Maybe the other. So that's, let's say, that's obvious. I'd like to add also that even for our clients, maybe two comments here. It has been expensive for tech companies before to accept payments. So now rates have been thankfully going down because of the evolution of digital banks and the wallets. But it still is an issue for foreign payments, remittances, that can be extremely expensive. Even successful companies here have high rates. And there's another industry which is the biggest GDP contributor that is in need of international transfer, is the BPO industry. And we are active in that industry as well, and that's a given. So definitely for our clients, there's also this need of solutions, which is right now expensive.
So what do we do in that kind of use case, Karen, is we give you an FBO account, like a bank account in the US, where you can collect all the money from all your investors or your users and things like that. And we seamlessly move that money to your account wherever you want. That is either in Vietnam or India or Philippines and whatnot. So it comes through a remittance trail. It's quick, it's fast, so you don't have to go through the bureaucracy here, with high fees and things like that. It's going to be really, really cheap. Because, you're sending what is $45 or $50, $60, something like that, and sending money through our rails, it's a fraction of a cost. It's less than $1. You know what I mean? So that's how we make it very, very cheap. And then we power use cases like yours, where if somebody is doing BPO services, has a need to collect money in the US and disburse to your employees or companies around the world, and that's where we kind of cross pollinate and then help our clients to build applications and power them.
Well, that gives us a lot to think about. I do have one last question for the both of you. Before we completely wrap up today's discussion, I do want to ask, where do you think the economy is headed in the next 5 years? And if you have any business advice for founders out there or C-level execs, so that they know how to kind of strategize the growth of their company moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, I can go first. I think it's a no-brainer today. There's a massive craze. I mean, I'm biased. Fintech is going to be probably something that we should all really keep an eye on, because this has disrupted the world in a way that it has made things more transparent. It has made more things cheaper, so that people, either through peer-to-peer or business to business or vice versa, can transact cost effectively and easily, right? I think that is the industry that we should be looking into. I think this has a massive implication in terms of economic growth. And second, and I think it's no brainer nowadays, in AI. I mean, I would keep crypto probably in the third place now, because an AI and ML has definitely, it's probably the new era of internet, I would say, how it was back in the days in the early 2000s. So this has really these are massive implications on the things that we do in terms of productivity, in terms of efficiency of doing research or content creations, or even really embedding that into the financial technology, so that we can do things much faster, better, cheaper, compliantly, right? I think those are the two things that we should keep an eye on. And I think the economic headed towards how does fintech, AI, this is going to cross-pollinate, and then something big and better is going to come. And the other thing is probably I wanted to see a lot more on biotech and nuclear nuclear energy, where we can be energy efficient there as well. But that's something down the line.
Very interesting. Biotech. Okay. How about you, Kieran?
Yeah, so if we're talking to founders and how they should think about the evolution in the coming 5 years, I would still revert back to my point earlier, where cash is king these days. It's going to be king for the coming 18 months. So it's great to have in mind this ability to be afloat for this period. So I think that's one key element of attention. And the second, I can only agree with AI. This is applicable. It's not even like the future. It's already here, and we can, each and every one of us, have access to those solutions today, and we can integrate it in our own computers. So this is the beginning of a big, I think, decade of evolution.
That's right.
Awesome. Yeah, we can't wait to see where AI and ML leads us, and how the world receives it. There's a lot of fuzz going on about it, but like Jay said, it's all about regulating it and regulating it on time. So that's something we're all excited about. All right, you two, thank you so much. That is a wrap. Kieran, thank you for being here, for making time for this conversation. We did learn a lot from this dialogue, and we do hope to hear more of Index Asia and you very, very soon. Of course, to conclude today's episode, let's take a nice photo. So, everyone, we will do that right now. All right. Everyone, look at your cameras and smile. 1, 2, 3. And one more. 1, 2, 3. There you go. Thank you so much, Kieran. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you, Kieran.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Zara.
Thank you. Nice talking to you, Kieran.
Cheers.
Woo. That was
All
quite
right.
interesting, Jay. I think it was one of the most interesting episodes so far. Well, every episode is. What did you think? Like, which one was your favorite takeaway from that?
I think I like how, we talk about Western world where infrastructure has been done, built, and then it's just now the tech shift is going. But how Kieran was talking about how ISP, and then how he's building. Sorry, I'm losing my voice here.
Yeah.
How he's building towers and stuff to build the infrastructures. I think that is super, super critical and important. I think because we still have so much things to do. I call these lands as so much opportunities, because a lot of things is yet to be built, and we can learn and we can adopt and we can kind of localize that need for these Southeast Asian countries. So I feel like I'm super, super excited. If you ask me, I'm like super pumped to do things here, because I could be making a small dent in the US and doing small things, but if I take that small things, and I could be moving mountains here in Nepal, because that means a big thing here. So I think I'm super excited. I think that even little things can make a massive impact on people's life in Nepal in general. So super interesting stuff.
Yeah, I actually super like the synergy that you raised earlier. Now that I think about it, Machnet isn't just for businesses that are B2C, but even B2B. And when it comes to investment, I mean, we've always been open to investments from all over the world. It's just it takes forever, and it's very stressful. I can only imagine what Kieran goes through on a daily basis, trying to fix all of that. So that is another quite intriguing point that was raised today. What I do want to know is what everyone here watching this has to say about today's episode. If you have insights, if you have questions, do drop them in the comment section below so that Jay can later on answer them. We also want to remind everyone that Jay has an ebook called Silicon Valley Secret to Fundraising, and that is out for all of you guys. All you have to do is scan the QR code that you see on your screen, and then it will lead you to the copy of that. And of course, we have another episode coming up in just a few weeks. So that's something to look forward to. It has been such a blast of a day, as always. Once again, my name is Zara Carbonell. I've been your moderator for today's session. Thank you so much for having me. And this is
Jay and TikTok with Jay. Sorry, wait, what is it? TikTok with Jade?
Jada Hall.
TikTok with Jade Hall. Okay, all right. We got it.
See you soon.
Thank you, guys.